It's just great to see people who have the means to actually make change in an industry like entertainment do something about it, because I feel like for too long conservatives have just been complaining, like, oh, we hate Hollywood, bad movies. It's like, okay, well, so what are you going to do about it? They're specifically looking for boxes being checked rather than the good writing. And so, you know, with something like Sheddin, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, I feel like you can relate to this character. You know, I feel like you can relate to this situation, to these themes.
Daddy's not dead.
Nana said he's bad.
No, baby, no. Daddy's not bad, okay? He's not bad. He's just sick.
Hi guys, it's Brett Cooper with the Daily Wire. I have Lauren Chen with us in the office today. She just watched our new original movie, Sheddin, and so we're gonna chat about that and woke Hollywood as a whole. So what did you think about Sheddin? I just watched it last night for the first time, so it's really fresh in my mind too.
So leading up to the movie, I know you guys have been doing a ton of awesome promo. I've been moving, so I actually was going into this like relatively blind. I didn't really know a lot about the premise. I knew it was going to be a thriller. That was pretty much it. So needless to say, you know, when she gets trapped in there, the pantry, which I think I could say without it being a spoiler, it's the general premise of the movie.
Mommy needs your help. Can you help me?
I was kind of like, oh, but the kids, like what's going to be happening? So I really liked it. I'm the kind of person who enjoys kind of being on the edge of my seat the entire time. And I think the movie really delivered that. And it's strange. It's such like a personal movie because it's, you know, you're so into that one character and her perspective. So it's really bringing an audience through an emotional roller coaster. And I thought they did a great job with the acting, atmosphere, everything. I hear it was filmed around this area, which is really, really cool. And I can't wait for other people to see it so we can talk about it more. Yeah.
And one thing that we've been hearing a lot is people concerned that it's too much of a horror or something that's too scary. And I'm a wimp when it comes to horror films. So I was worried about watching it, but it really is not. I think you made a good point that it is a character-based story. We are following this one woman. You are involved in her experience. And so you are on the edge of your seat and it's suspenseful, but it's not scary. You're so invested in her fight that I didn't feel like I was, you know, on the outside watching something that was, you know, terrifying.
Yeah, and I think that's a good distinction to make between something being like a thriller versus horror, because, you know, there are parts of this movie where you're going to be kind of wondering what's next. You may even want to look away because you want a certain outcome to happen, but it's very different than a slasher or anything kind of jumping out at you. That's not going to happen. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love horror too, but it's just a very different movie. And I think this is, like you said, very character driven.
Yeah.
Everything that's happening is driven by the people who, like the characters who are in it. Nothing supernatural or too scary or anything like that. I definitely wouldn't watch it with kids though, just because some of the themes, it can be intense, but I don't think people need to worry about being scared in that way.
No, not at all. And I think especially because the character of Jessica, especially as a woman, I think that so many female viewers will see themselves in her, even if they've never been, you know, horrifically trapped in a pantry before. I think being able to see ourselves in a woman that is fighting for her life, fighting for her children, that she really has something to live for, it's empowering. And I think that if people go in, you know, even though it is a thriller and it's suspenseful, but knowing that they're going to learn something, that they're going to walk away with a new sense of power, I think that that's really exciting, especially as women.
Yeah, and it's like kind of interesting because we often hear about strong female characters in Hollywood, and I would say Jessica definitely counts as one.
Yeah.
But what I think made her unique and not like the typical Hollywood heroine is that she's not perfect. She has flaws. Because we hear a lot of people, a lot of fans especially, complaining about like Mary Sue characters who do everything perfect. They're just self-inserts pretty much for female audience members. But when we're introduced to Jessica, like, you know, she has trouble she's working through. She admits she's not a perfect mother, but what makes her so endearing is just her commitment to her family, which you don't need to be a perfect person for. And she makes mistakes. She has flaws. And that just makes it even more relatable and less like you're being preached at, you know, like this is not just like a girl power feminist movie message. It's a strong independent character who happens to be female, but she still has all of the baggage that anyone else might have.
Yep. And we're not beating you over the head with, you know, conservative values, even though Daily Wire is, conservative. It's nice to see something that is, on a whole, talking about values that anybody can relate to, regardless of your political affiliation. And I mean, you just said it, but that independence, the resilience, the overcoming the choices of your past, that kind of thing.
And it's funny because I've heard people accuse this movie of being conservative propaganda. They did the same thing for Run, Hide, Fight, even though it was like, okay, Daily Wire is just the distributor, so they weren't even like, at the time it was being made, they weren't involved. But I think this movie is actually less political than your average Hollywood movie, if that makes sense, even though it's from the Daily Wire. And I think that just speaks to how used we are to having political messaging in our movies. But like you said, when it comes to Sheddin, this is just a regular movie. There are definitely themes and values that are introduced into it, like most pieces of art, but it's not something where if you have like a liberal family member or someone, they're going to be like, hang on, wait a second. Yeah. I sense Ben Shapiro in this. Like, no.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so many things, you made an interesting point when we were talking earlier about how liberal, Hollywood, everything is fueled with propaganda these days. And so it is nice to see a story that is just, character driven, is value based, rather than pushing an ideology on an entire audience base. We Americans, I think the number is that we watch 28 hours of television and films a week. So that gives us 28 hours basically to be subjected with ideologies and opinions and that kind of thing. And most of that is going to be from a very woke left Hollywood. And so it's exciting that Daily Wire is going to start infiltrating this space. And I think we have a leg up. I mean, this film is incredible. And we're coming in swinging, I think, with something that's really exciting and is competitive. To try to combat the hold that they have over us.
Yeah, and I think we've become so desensitized to having this constant messaging shoved down our throats that it's going to be refreshing for an audience when they can once again just enjoy a movie for it being a movie. Hollywood wasn't always like this 20 years ago. It wasn't like this, but it's been so inundated with this type of politics over the past, especially, I would say, like 4 years. It's been like nonstop, that I think it's almost going to feel like a breath of fresh air when you can just appreciate a movie for being a movie. You can be introduced to characters, like you said, themes, without it being like, okay, so which one is supposed to be the Donald Trump in this situation? Yeah, like, like how exactly are the gender politics at play here? It's like, no, you don't need to worry about this. Yeah. This is just individuals interacting with each other, a very human story.
It's entertainment.
Yeah, it's entertainment. Yeah. It's novel concept.
Exactly, right? I was telling Lauren how prior to coming to work at the Daily Wire, I was in entertainment. I was an actor for about 10 years, and then I was working at a production company prior to leaving Los Angeles. And I left during the time of the Summer of Love, BLM, because my production company cut about 70% of our projects because they weren't political enough, because they had too many white characters, because we didn't have a Native American story and we needed one desperately. And so I was in development, and so I was reading scripts, and I would pass on projects that I thought were really incredible, and they would say, well, no, what we're really looking for is a Native American woman-driven story, because we need to check that box.
Very specific.
Exactly. And they're like, so you need to go find one, you need to do this, oh, this one, this is too toxically male, that kind of thing. And I was like, these are incredible stories that were being presented, and you're immediately brushing them off because they don't fit your little intersectional box. Yeah. So it feels like everything that we're given is, specifically tailored to, not be canceled to fit whatever the woke mob wants.
I feel like that's frustrating because when you're involved in a story and it really grips you, I feel like you should be able to relate to the characters regardless of whether they're a Native American female or toxically masculine male or whatever it is, because you should see past those characteristics to the deeper characterizations. And, when we're focusing so much on what the characters look like or who they're attracted to, I feel like there is this element of just actually good writing that is being taken for granted. Not that you can't have diverse casts and good writing, but I feel like kind of like what you're saying, these studios, they're specifically looking for boxes being checked rather than the good writing. And so, with something like Sheddin, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, I feel like you can relate to this character. I feel like you can relate to this situation, to these themes. And I think that's storytelling should bring people together, but it's almost like they're using it now to divide people and say, like, you're not the right skin color, so this shouldn't apply to you. This movie wasn't made for you.
Yeah, it's divisive. And I also feel like a lot of the things that Hollywood is doing are completely missing the bulk of America, which is, the working class, normal, American families. They're directing all of this content towards the, the metropolitan New York, Los Angeles liberals and, to check these political boxes. And they're leaving these normal Americans, many of whom have more conservative traditional values, whether or not they're political, and they're being faced with this content that they can't really relate to, that's overtly political. And so I feel like when I turn on my TV and I watch movies, I don't see anything anymore that represents normal, broken, flawed people. And so that was another reason why I really liked Sheddin, was even though, I'm not a mother, I'm not an addict, and whatever, I've, dealt with my own, circumstances, and I can relate to that character and, her experiences, even though I haven't been in that situation. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that they're really tailoring their content to like New York and Los Angeles, because I don't know if you've noticed this, but we keep seeing that, these movies that are heralded by critics as being so amazing, they don't do well with general audiences.
No.
And vice versa. And we've seen this with, Ghostbusters 2016, the recent Terminator movie. And it's like, it's almost like most of the country just wants to have a good movie. Like they don't really care about these boxes. It's great that online Twitter likes these films. But, ultimately, I feel like Hollywood and these mainstream studios, they are going to need to, I guess, like pick a lane. Do you want to be heralded as like these activists, or do you actually want the average person to enjoy your movie?
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's going to be really hard for them to do both.
Exactly. I mean, it was like the Fauci documentary. I don't know if you saw after the Rotten Tomatoes thing, where I think on Rotten Tomatoes, they got 100% from critics being like, this is so amazing, this like flawed man. And then just from normal Americans, it was like, this is awful. We hate him.
I don't even want to watch this.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Give it a rating.
Like, why was this even made? And so there's a big disconnect it's the normal, conflict between normal Americans and the elites. And right now, Hollywood is in elite status. And they're trying to give us media that they think is beneficial for us, that we need to learn so we can be as woke as them and that kind of thing. And
how do you think that studio executives are dealing with all this? Because I know when I first started like noticing woke Hollywood trends and how it wasn't what audiences wanted, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, they can't keep this up because they're losing money on these movies. And ultimately, I mean, Hollywood is a business.
Yeah.
So my thinking was like, all right, we're going to have a couple more of these bombs, and then eventually we'll just we'll get back to general, just good movies. But it seems like, I don't know, maybe it's not all about money, because it seems like they keep throwing money at these projects that we know are going to fail.
I feel like they're afraid. I mean, so we're seeing, the most recent controversy has been Joe Rogan and Spotify. The CEO is, apologizing to his employees for like, oh, I'm so sorry, and we don't want to be canceled, that kind of thing. I feel like they are genuinely afraid of the mob, and they're trying to, be the perfect woke establishment. And I think people are going to watch whatever is put in front of them. And right now we don't really have a diverse array of options. And so I think that they're just trusting that if people, turn on their Netflix subscription, their HBO, whatever, they're going to click like, okay, this is fine, I'll watch it, and I guess I'll be fine with it. I think that they're trusting that we're just all such sheep that we're going to follow along with
like
it.
what we tell you.
Exactly,
to like.
Exactly. That, we're going to give you these 4 new shows, and you're going to have to deal with them because that's all you have. And before Daily Wire has jumped into this, we didn't have any other options. So I think they're banking on that. So maybe we'll throw them for a loop when we actually start making things that are, competing with them.
Hopefully, because I don't know about you, but I'm kind of sick and tired of hearing about Euphoria. I mean, maybe it's great, but it's like, I feel like we need to get more shows out there, more content out there, because it's like, once the media kind of runs with something that it's like, oh, wait, audiences actually kind of like this, and critics don't hate it, it becomes this sacred cow, but it's like, no, we don't all have to watch the same thing.
I also think there's like a cult following around shows like Euphoria, where I watched the first episode and I could not do anymore, just because of, I thought it was beautiful, like it's beautifully shot, but the tones and the themes, I was like, this is just not something that I need to spend my time absorbing. But I think they create this cult following around it, and people are so desensitized to that kind of media, whether it's hyper political or whether we're seeing teenagers in those situations,
hypersexualized,
completely inappropriate and terrible for their well-being and their development, for young audiences to be watching that. But I think that we create this cult following around it, and people become okay with it and accustomed to it. Like, sure, everybody else is watching Euphoria, I'll be fine. And then there's the few of us that are like, this is insane. Like, that we're, all watching this one thing that really is terrible for us. The one cult thing that I did watch was Yellowstone, and I
actually have not seen that. I'm
that
one of the few
worthy.
people who haven't seen
that one is worthy of the cult following, I would say. But no, I think that they are hoping that we are going to turn a blind eye to their propaganda, and for a long time we have. So hopefully that's going to be changing.
Yeah, hopefully. And it's just great to see people who have the means to actually make change in an industry like entertainment do something about it. Because I feel like for too long, conservatives have just been complaining.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we hate Hollywood, bad movies. It's like, okay, well, so what are you going to do about it? Like, are we just going to stop watching TV and movies entirely? Everyone just go back to, like, reading books or something?
Yeah.
In which case, we're removing ourselves from the culture, which isn't good either.
No.
Because then you are essentially ceding ground to all of these wokeists. So I think this really is the most productive thing we can do.
Well, I've always said that, and I think most people understand, that politics is downstream from culture.
Yeah.
And Daily Wire aims to create culture, and I think that's the only way that we can gain ground in this country. So I think it's important that we are, taking these strides and we're doing this. And I think also, that we have the money and the resources to do it, but we also have the talent. They're getting really fantastic people to work on these films. And before, I think the only films in the conservative sphere were either documentaries or like religious films, which are fantastic, but those have a very niche, small audience. And I think creating things that are relatable to everyone, that are interesting and intriguing and, a little edgy, like that's what's going to, move us forward and push the needle.
Yeah, and I think there is a difference between, the left, the way they talk about the Daily Wire being involved in these projects. You would think that they were making movies specifically for conservatives.
Yeah.
Like, that is how they are trying to spin things, which is absolutely not true from the, Run, Hide, Fight and Sheddin. These are just movies. But I think it kind of speaks to their reasoning where movies have to be inherently political.
Yeah.
So it's hard for them to imagine a paradigm where that's not true, where you are just going back to general movie making. And I mean, if any like lefties, liberals, or anything like that have seen these movies, I would love to hear about it, what you thought about it. Like, did you feel like you were being politically persecuted while watching these things or anything like that? Because, I don't think that's the case. And I feel like the more people understand that, the broader the audience for these films will be.
It's also interesting because Hollywood is not only, bending a knee and is so afraid of, our woke leftists here, they're, appealing to China. They're trying to bend a knee to communist China, which is a huge machine in Hollywood. They fund so many of our movies. They have a huge distribution network, and so many things are funneled through them.
Right, and what's interesting about the Chinese market is that right now it is huge for Hollywood, right? If you don't get distribution in China, if your movie's not shown in China, it's really going to hurt your bottom line. And there are several different ways to ensure that your movie gets shown in China. There is a quota that the Chinese government has on foreign films. A way to get around that and to be counted as like a local film is to have Chinese funding in your movie. It's almost like kind of a guarantee that you're going to have access to the market, also to have Chinese cast brought on board. And so that is why we see for so many of these films, you might have a scene or two that's just in Shanghai or in Hong Kong. You might have a supporting character who's just Asian. As someone who's Asian, I'm not hating on, representation, but as you see very transparently, this is done for business purposes. Nothing wrong with business, but there's the hypocrisy element in that oftentimes these studios are trying to preach human rights, acceptance, tolerance, diversity. Yeah, we look at the Chinese government's current policies toward any number of like ethnic, religious, or like, sexual identity minorities, and it's like the opposite of what they're preaching in the West. So I don't see how these studio executives can make it seem like this is anything other than just pandering for money. Exactly.
And another thing that people don't know is that when they're receiving that Chinese funding, a lot of times the scripts have to be rewritten or things have to be changed, or when, they're distributing things in China, episodes are removed. Like they just started distributing Simpsons on Disney Plus in China, and they removed a few episodes about Tiananmen Square so that, nobody would know about that, of course, that kind of thing. So one thing with Sheddin is that when Daily Wire acquired the script, it had been rewritten and it had been softened after it had been acquired by another production company.
Really?
And so they brought it back to the original. They did not pull out any of the, touchy themes or anything like that. It is completely... it is as the story is supposed to be told. It was not touched by Chinese communists because we did not take funding from them or anything like that. But the hold that they have over the industry and over our lives really is shocking.
No, it is shocking, and it's frustrating because we see all of this discourse in Hollywood, in Western countries, about blacklisting such and such actor because he dared to support Donald Trump, or, these things that they are making out to be travesties. Meanwhile, they are working hand in hand with the very people who are, I don't know, let's say, organizing Uyghur camps and things like that. So, I mean, it's try to put in perspective who you're persecuting Hollywood and who you're working with, because I feel like you're definitely on the wrong side of history. You know, it's not just China as well. We've seen to get access into Middle Eastern markets as well. They've kind of censored LGBT themes or things like that. Specifically Disney I'm talking about here. They're one of the worst culprits of it. And it's like, you know what? If you want to do that just to ensure that your bottom line is okay, that's one thing. But then to turn around and try to paint yourself as activist corporations who are standing up for the marginalized in like America, no, I'm sorry, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're a corporate shill or you're a human rights activist. You guys are shills.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And most audiences have no idea and they eat it up anyway. Yeah. And it's sad. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, if you guys are interested in watching Sheddin, you can see that exclusively on dailywire.com. Subscribe today and check it out.